Paradise Lost is one of the greatest poems dissecting and analysing evil ever written, and in my mind, it's one of the best characterizations of evil for modern readers because we live in a world where a poem or story characterizing Satan as some external character that will tempt you from the righteous path can easily be dismissed as mere fantasy or something that doesn't seem fully understandable or believable, whereas Paradise Lost is able to internalize Satan and show how it's more of an evil force tempting you from both inside and outside of yourself, as opposed to being purely external. And it's also easily understandable and relatable for those who aren't religious too, as while it does tell the story of Satan, it's also a tale of evil and how we not only can be corrupted in our lives, but have all definitely been corrupted once before. And if we are all being honest with ourselves, we will be able to admit to falling off the righteous path once or twice in our past. Because in Paradise Lost, Satan is not depicted as this character that knows they are evil, but rather as a character who genuinely thinks they are fighting for a just cause, and fighting for the quote-unquote greater good, when in reality they are only causing more harm to others, the world, and even themselves, which is scarily relatable for many of us, as Satan is a character that is corrupted himself, as it's not people that know they are evil that corrupt us, it's more so people who are so convinced that they are the good side that can really corrupt us. And so it's really just a great exploration of evil for both those who are religious and those who are not. And so in this video, you can expect to learn why Satan only talks to good people, why envy shatters any chance of happiness, and why it's us that corrupts power rather than the other way round. Starting with 1, why Satan only talks to good people. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell a hell of heaven. Paradise Lost tells the story of Satan climbing out of the depths of hell, which he was banished to after he acted out against God in the past, to rage once again against God and seek retribution and vengeance for being punished to hell for all those years. He chooses to battle God by trying to corrupt God's newest creation, which is mankind, and so Satan travels to the Garden of Eden, where he plans to tempt and corrupt Adam and Eve. And so for a religious reader, this is the reason you have evil inside of you trying to tempt you, and for a non-religious reader, it just makes for a good backstory and sets up the poem to drive its lessons home more effectively. As for either reader, the beginning of John Milton's poem is already telling us one important thing, which is that Satan or evil or whatever you want to call it is more interested in talking to good people, with the good people being represented in the story by Adam and Eve. And that's not because Satan is actively trying to turn good people evil, but rather because someone's good nature can be used to do evil. Because as the quote says, the mind is its own place. It can make a heaven of a hell of a heaven. In other words, you can justify your immoral or illegal actions as good within yourself if you have a strong enough argument for it. And that is where Satan and evil will choose to talk from within you. Because as Nietzsche would also write about, humans have a predisposition to want to be self-sufficient and in control, and so we can often fall prey to the idea that we have a higher understanding of morality than we really do, and we start to play with what is truly moral or immoral, and when it's okay to do something bad, but for a greater good. And we see this play out in the world time and time again, where the truly evil people of the world are able to make themselves feel like the hero, and they're able to justify their immoral actions as being for a greater good to not only themselves, but potentially millions of people. And that is where true evil and corruption can start, and that is where the danger begins, because these people genuinely feel like the good guys in the story, when all that's happening is that evil or Satan or whatever you want to call it is talking to them through good. And it's a similar concept to what Dostoevsky also explored in Crime and Punishment, where Raskolnikov is able to justify killing an evil lady because she is such a net negative, and so by killing her he only benefits the world because those that she abused physically, emotionally, and financially will now be free from the burden of her existence. Except what both Dostoevsky and John Milton show us is that while you may be able to justify a bad action for the greater good in your own head, you don't know how committing that bad action will change you and take effect within your mind. Because as we saw in Dostoevsky's novel, Raskolnikov did benefit those that he'd freed from the evil woman's grip, but he now also has to lie to the police and manipulate others in order to not get caught for the crime that he committed, while he also has to kill the evil woman's good and completely innocent sister just because she walked in on the crime. And so now good people must also suffer because of his quote-unquote greater good action. And so while it all started with good intentions and noble intentions, he has now taken that evil woman's place, and he is now the one doing bad things in the world. And so to take it back to Paradise Lost, John Milton is actively warning us that Satan or evil will choose to talk to and through good. Therefore, we must always live with an understanding that we are not good people or evil people, we are merely people, and that we can just as easily fall to both. Therefore, we must carefully consider all our actions and listen to our conscience more than we listen to our intelligent and well-justifiable head. Which leads us to number 2, why it's us that corrupts power and not the other way round. Here for his envy will not drive us, hence here we may reign secure, and in my choice to reign is worth ambition, though in hell. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. What John Milton is pointing at here is how it's so easy to feel as though our powerlessness or power is something that determines our quality of life, as we can feel as though if others had less power and we had slightly more power, we could then all be living in a better world, as he is pointing out how we actually place more importance on power being a metric for a better quality of life than the actual place we are living in, as the corrupted Satan says having power in hell is better than serving in heaven. And so in other words, he's literally saying that living in a horrible place but having power is better than living in eternal bliss but not having that power. And so what John Milton seems to suggest is that power is something that will naturally occur. Just like a small portion of the waterbeds in the world hold most of the water, the way nature works is that there will always be a technical power imbalance. However, that is fine when it's allowed to naturally occur, as the small portion that the power flows to aren't actively trying to seek it either. Just like a sporting team works well when the captain isn't interested in power, but more so interested in what's best for the team and quality of play. And so therefore they make a great captain because they don't want to be captain, but they also don't want to not be captain. It just really doesn't matter in their heads. What matters is the quality of play. And so of course there are natural born leaders, and there are natural born people that others are going to listen to and want to follow and want to take charge, and that is perfectly fine, just as long as not everyone is trying to backstab others and not everyone is plotting for power, but just like nature, allowing it to naturally flow. And so in Paradise Lost, heaven represents a world where there is a power imbalance because of course God is in charge, but it wasn't crafted that way. He didn't try and manipulate his way to power in this poem, he just naturally has it. But hell is a place where people are actively placing an importance on power and using power as a metric for a better quality life. And so power is not a bad thing, it is our view of it that corrupts. And John Milton suggests that the way you break free of a life you don't like is not by looking at the world through a lens of oppressor, oppressed, and power, but by simply following your morality and conscience, with no ulterior motive other than willing the good of the other, which in turn will only will the good of you. Which leads us to number 3, why envy shatters happiness. Me, miserable, which way shall I fly? Infinite wrath and infinite despair. Which way I fly is hell, myself am hell. And in the lowest deep, a lower deep still threatening to devour me opens wide, to which the hell I suffer seems a heaven. John Milton shows us how evil is able to use envy as a tool that makes us actively choose a life we hate in pursuit of the life we want. As he writes of Lucifer traveling into the Garden of Eden, basically heaven itself, and seeing the happy faces of Adam and Eve. Eve, which made him so full of envy, jealousy, and anger because they get to live a life with a face that he can only dream of, a face of happiness. And so from this envy, he chooses to try and corrupt Adam and Eve and destroy their happy life. But this is all stirred from a place inside Lucifer where he just wishes he was happy himself. And so if he didn't just react upon envy, he would have just joined in on the peace and happiness of Eden, and he would have been happy himself. But because he didn't bother to ask why he was envious, and rather just acted upon the envy, he actively chose the life he doesn't want. As John Milton does a great job in this poem of showing us how by acting upon envy, the envy doesn't disappear, it will ultimately continue. And if the feeling of envy is such a bad feeling, then we should want it to stop, and the only way that we can stop it is by asking ourselves why we are envious and then learning from it. And so all in all, at each stage of Satan's philosophy here, we are taught that it exists within us, and that our world, our life, is actively chosen by us in the way that we perceive the world. As he says, our mind is its own place, we can turn heaven into hell in our mind, and we can turn hell into heaven, which is a sentiment that Einstein shared as well. But what are your thoughts on Paradise Lost? Let me know down below in the comments. If you liked the video, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and until next time, take care.